Okay, so as usual, let's type an exclamation mark, enter. So we have the basic components of the HTML file. Let me name the title as form. And to begin a form, the very first tag that we need to use is form tag. And make sure that you bring out all the components within the form tag. Let me show how we can do that. So we have the form tag. So we're gonna enter all the inputs within the form tag. So the first thing that we're going to do is to input type text. So if you want to get the user to type some text, you can use the input tag, use the attribute type equals to text, and we can type as name so that it appears that user needs to enter his name. Alright, but if the user clicks on the title called name, the input box is not accessible. To make it more accessible to the user, we can use a label tag. So we give the information what the user needs to type within the label and enclose the input tag within it. Let me type as label. So we need the name. Let's type as name. And let's enclose the input type equal to text within the label tag. Let me save it. So now if the user clicks on the name, the input box is accessible to the user, which means he can type in its name. Or there's another way to do this. We can type as label for equals to name and make sure that you give the value that you give for for attribute of label to the ID attribute of the input. Let me show you that. So label for, let's say, name. Okay, so this is what appears there. So to make the label accessible to the user, let's create an ID attribute within the input type equals to name. So it's exactly the same, and I would suggest this way because you don't need to actually enclose the input tag within the label tag, which might confuse you sometimes. Okay, next let's see how we can use the attributes, placeholder, and how to set the size of the input box to type the text. Okay, so let's type as placeholder equals enter text, and if I save it, this shows that the user needs to enter some text in it, or you can use it in any way that you wish. And if you want to set the size of the input box, you can type as size equals double quotes and you can type any value. But make sure that this attribute size doesn't work with all the input tags. You'll see that in a second now. So the next input type is called number, and it has the attributes of minimum, maximum, and we could also enter value. Value attribute is accessible to most of the types. And now let's see how we can get some age from the user. This time I'm going to use a label for age. And since we need a number, the input type is going to be number. And as we have used age for the for attribute of label, I have given the same value for the ID. So this is how it looks. So now let's say we want to set the minimum age to 15. If I save it and if I click the down arrow, it doesn't go below the 15. It's the minimum value. In the same way, we could also set the maximum value. Max equals double quotes, let's say 20. So did you notice that the input box became too small now? And the maximum value is now 20. So the size attribute doesn't work with the input type equals to number. So if we want to increase the size of the box, we can set up a huge maximum value, but this is not suggested because we have an easy way to do this, which is by using CSS language, and you'll see that in the upcoming videos soon. And we could also set some values, let's say 50. The maximum is 200, which is impossible now, but it's okay. We can also set the value for input type equals to text as well. We can type text there because we're getting text in the first input that we have. The next input type would be date. So to do that, let's type again as label for date. Let's ask for the date of birth from the user. So input type equals date, and with the ID that we have given for 4, the label tag, and that's it. So the user can select any date they wish from this. And they could also type in, change the date, the year by typing it as well. So the next tag is going to be the input type equals to email, where we can get email from the user. So I have, without wasting time, I have written it over here in the same way that we have used the date. Let me close it. This is how it looks, and it suggests the email addresses that you have already given before. So make sure to type the email address with the @ sign, or else at last when we finish off doing this form, when we submit it, it will show you an error. So let's say that we want to get a mobile number from the user. For that we can type as label for mobile, and let's type as mobile number so that the user knows that he needs to enter a mobile number, and the input type that we need to use would be text. The reason is, if you use a number, the user won't be able to use a plus sign or anything if it is needed. So you can type a mobile number of your wish. Alright, now let's go for the range. So let's go for label for equals to range, and let's ask something from the user, maybe like how much do you prefer this website, or maybe network. That's fine. So to do that, this time we're going to use input type equals to range. So this will look like this, where you can drag and select the values. To get the values in the first, we use a 0 and 10 before and end of the input tag. So let's say that we want to set up a value there. To do that, we can set up minimum value like 0, and we could also set a maximum value that we wish, maybe 10 as in this case. And when a user comes to this form, we can set to which value it has to stand. So if I set 8, it would stand on 8. If I set 1, it would stand on 1. So it depends on how you want the user to see it first. And we could also adjust the maximum and minimum values so that the range is set accordingly. Make sure to change the numbers that you show in the web page to know that you are using this value. And I have forgot to use a placeholder for the email. And yeah, so let's see how we can select options now. To do that, we can use a select tag, and within the select tag we can get some options. We can also include the values, so it will help you in the backend. And if you want to group those values, you can use the tag called opt group, and make sure to label it using the name that you want to show there. Now let's see it in action. Let's type as label for options, and maybe we can request something from the user like how did you find this website? And here comes the select tag. So within the select tag, let's go for the options first. Let's say suggested by friends. So since we have only one option, it shows like this. We can copy paste it for a number of times. Let's say friends as the second option, and for the third one, let's go ahead with advertisements real quick. And then finally, let's go for YouTube. Okay, now it's done. So now you can see all those options are showed there. But if you want to group it, let's use the opt group. Make sure not to forget to label it using the label attribute within the opt group. Let's say people, and make sure to close the opt group tag and enclose it with the number of options that you need to have there. Let's see it in action. Yeah, So the first two options have been enclosed within the topic of people. So we can do the same for the next two tags as well, for the advertisements and YouTubes, but this time let's label it something like campaign, and let's close the opt group by enclosing them. So this is how we let's see another way to do this. To do that, we have an input tag list equal to something, and make sure to give that value to the ID attribute of the data list, and you can list out the options within them, and you don't actually have to close them. You can just put value. So let's see it in action now. So I can label as what's our industry, and I'm gonna ask for an input list equals to row, and whatever the value that we enter within the list attribute of the input tag, give it to the ID attribute of the data list, and within the data list we can type out the option value, and we can list out what we want here. Let's say technology, and we can actually close the option group, but it's not a necessary thing to close it here because this is a data list and shows like this now. But if you actually enter some value, it shows as a sub value to what you have entered in the value attribute of the option. For the moment, let's neglect it, and let's copy paste it for a couple of times and name them according to our wish. We can name it as maybe business, and let me name the others real quick. Let's say education and probably logistics. Okay, so if you click on the drop down arrow, you can see it. And the best thing about data list is you can actually type. If you enter the first two letters of the keyword, it will suggest you the options there. So this is what we're gonna see next. So let me use a span tag here, and let's go for the input directly. Input type equals to radio, and we might need to give a value just to make it useful for the backend, and we can give it an ID so that we can label it. Let me name it as male, and make sure to give a name attribute for the input type equals to radio. Let's say gender. This is pretty important. So as usual, let me type as label for the ID that I've given is male. Let me type it there, and let me type as male. So this is how a radio button looks like, and we use this kind of input to get only one option out of two or more options. And to do that, let me copy paste it, and let's go for the next gender, which is female. So I may have to change the ID to female and the value as well. So let me save it. So now we have two radio inputs. So if I select one option, I cannot select the other option. It automatically goes away. The reason is we use the same value for the name attribute of both their input types. So if I change the value in the name attribute, which means we can select two options. So the way it works is make sure that you select the same value for the name attribute of any number of radio tags that you use. Even a slight change like a letter S would mean that it is a different. So be careful of that always. But if you want to select more than one options, we can use the checkbox for it. So let me type a span equal within the span tag your interest, and this time let's type the input type as checkbox, and we can use an ID attribute so that we can use it within the label tag to make it more accessible to the user. And let's give it a name as well. Let's say options, and let's give it a value. And you wouldn't be able to see the value given here while you use the web page, but when a user submits his or her response, the value is really necessary to check it for us. And let's give an option like technology. So we have one option here, So even though we give some breaks, we have a problem here. The text you are interested is kind of disturbing the alignment of the options that we're giving. There is one way to overcome this, and it's a good way actually, which is by using the field set tag. And remember, you need to close it. So within the field set tag, we have a legend tag which gives out the topic, and we can put the contents or take inputs within it. So let's see how we can do that. So first I'm going to take out this pen tag and type as field set, and I'm going to close the field set once I get all the inputs. So I have enclosed all the inputs within the field set tag. Alright, now let's give it a legend which gives out the topic of the field set that we're using. Let's say your interest again. So this is how it looks. It kind of encloses the content or the inputs that you give in within it by a small border. And now let's see how we can type in passwords confidentially. To do that, we can use the same way, like label for, and to keep it short, let's type as PS, and let's request password from the user. And within the input type, we can use password this time, and let's give the ID attribute, and it's done. So if you type in any text or numbers, it wouldn't be visible to you. Alright, so let's see how we can get in some files to our web page. To do that, this time we can use a paragraph tag because it doesn't have to be more accessible now. And let's type the input type as file, so the user will be able to upload any files to the web page. So it shows as a button where you can use it. And let's say you want to take in multiple files. To do that, it's pretty simple. You just need to use the attribute of multiple within the input type, and you can notice that the button which says choose file has now changed to choose files as plural. So now you can choose multiple files. Let me show you that. So as you can see, the 2 files has been selected now. So if you want to get comments from the users, you can use the text area tag. To do that, you can first start with the paragraph tag to address it, like paste your comments here. And now let's go ahead and open up a text area tag. Just close it. So this is how it looks, and you can actually drag to resize it in your web page itself. But if you want to set a specific size, you can use the rows equals, let's say 10, and columns equals 20. In that way you can resize the comment box according to your wish, but remember, this is not like a table tag. So finally, let's see how we can submit the form now using a button. To do that, we can use the button tag, type equals to submit, and make sure to give it a text called submit there, so that it shows the name of the button in the web page. So after you fill out all the details in the forms, you can click on the submit buttons to submit it. And I just noticed now that I haven't given a topic from my web page. Let's use the h1 tag for that to make it look bigger. Let's save it. So our form is now complete. We can get text from the user, set up minimum and maximum ages, get the user to type some, get in some dates, enter email addresses, mobile numbers. But one more important thing is, like, if the user doesn't include an @ sign while he or she enters the email address, that gives out an error when you click on submit button. So now you can select ranges, select topics, the data list, and select one option and type in passwords as well. Alright, so we have made a complete form now, and you have learned all the basics to make up a form. But if you decide to give it a good design using the CSS, make sure to please subscribe us, so that we'll be learning CSS in the next video onwards, and I assure you we'll be making the exact same form look really beautiful using CSS in the upcoming videos. So if you missed any basic, please go through the videos and have a great day.